Hello everybody, welcome. You've ascended from the darkness of the tunnel into the light of the upper room. So we've got 40 minutes and a couple of incredibly experienced and talented panellists. We're going to explore the topic of what it means to actually harness the things that we've been talking about all day to drive growth of business. I'm going to let the panellists introduce themselves in a minute, but just by way of personal introduction, I'm Simon. I'm COO at Mention Me, and I've been running referral and advocacy programs at Mention Me in one form or another for 7 years now, so I have a little bit of experience. But welcome up here. Well, let's start to get into it. Now, Tony and Laura, I would love to hear from you about a brief introduction to you and your experience, and also as part of that, love to hear about something that you currently advocate for, a brand, a service, a product, anything at all that isn't your current employer.
Nice to see everybody, and great to be in a room with light as well. So I currently am VP of Growth and Performance Marketing at WW Weight Watchers, and have been there for the last 2 years. So an interesting ride during COVID. I started on the day of lockdown and went in to transform the marketing team. So spent a lot of the time doing a lot of restructure to really build a team ready for our digital first future, I think, in terms of what we all know about WW, which is great that we're here today to talk about, is our members and our advocates, known as a physical first business, but we're a digital app at the heart. So how do you kind of transition and do both physical and digital? So it was an interesting dynamic during COVID we can get into. And then previous to that, I spent 5 years at the Walt Disney Company, again, doing digital transformation across EMEA, managing all of the 23 markets that we had, and trying to unite our consumer experience across all of our brands and all of our lines of business. So if you think about Disney and all of the multitudes of brands and franchises they had, how as a consumer do you experience the totality of that succinctly? So I was helping build that in the readiness for Disney+. So.
Right. Great. And what would you advocate for?
What would I advocate for?
You've got an audience here. Like, what would you recommend to them?
Well, I would recommend, as I do pretty much every time I'm on the common with my dog. I did get a lockdown puppy 2 years ago, Jack Daniels, after my favorite drink, a little Cavapoo, and have found through the course of owning and training him, he's a very fussy food eater, and we've tried multiple things, but the one thing that he loves and eats all the time and has stuck to it is butternut box food.
So you have Butternut's team actually here.
Yes. There you go. You're my dog's savior. He doesn't eat, and that's the only thing he eats. So thank you. Our freezer is full of it. We need to get a bigger freezer.
Thank you.
Fab. So I'm Laura Riches. I love wine. So my first job in wine was actually as marketing director of Naked Wines, who you might know as an online retailer, subscription business, but was at the time part of Majestic. So I was the marketing director there for several years, absolutely loved kind of thinking about how to tell the story of our winemakers, to get customers to advocate for us. And led 3 years of record-breaking growth at Naked Wines. I subsequently left Naked Wines in 2018, had my daughter, and had to think about, if I was going to start my own business, what would it be? And it was actually a moment of serendipity. I'd been thinking about, well, I love wine, I really care about sustainability, so that's something I'm interested in. I love having the odd glass on a Tuesday night, and actually currently you've got to think, do I open a bottle, do I not? And boxed wine answers a lot of those questions, but so far, I mean, probably quite a few of you, who's had boxed wine in this room? And, for whom was that probably quite a horrible experience? There's no reason why that needs to be the case. So I had this idea, can we make boxed wine luxury? And it just so happened that my friend, also called Laura, I'm not talking in the third person, texted me and said, I've had this idea, it's to start a boxed wine company. And I had to screenshot my screen and say, I've had this idea too. And we started this in 2020, in the November. It went viral, so we sold out of the first 2,000 litres of our wine within 2 weeks with zero marketing spend. thanks to a bit of help from William Sitwell from The Telegraph. And since then, we've grown into a business that serves direct-to-consumer on our website. We sell into bars and restaurants, and we've just hired our 7th person, which is, for a tiny business like ours, a big milestone. So that's what I do these days. And who do I advocate for? Well, firstly, Button-Up Box, even though I don't even have a dog, because I think what they do is absolutely amazing. I think the other business that I absolutely love is Gusto. I've been a member of Gusto for probably 4 or 5 years now, so early incumbent, and I just think their strapline, the most beloved way to eat dinner, is totally true. Like, I love getting to the end of the day, pouring a glass of wine, and making my Gusto recipe. So I'd have to say Gusto.
Great, thank you. I always like asking the question of who would you recommend, or who have you recommended recently? Because you can see pretty much a light goes on behind people's eyes when they are entranced in the concept of wanting to advocate and sell for it. And it's difficult sometimes when you're in the day-to-day to think that is what you're trying to engender. So I'd encourage you all to think about what has made you recommend something, or ask your customers what makes them recommend you. Now, we heard a lot this morning about customer love being an engine for growth for a business. I was wondering if you could talk to the extent to which community of advocates and customers who really care and love for you is important for you and your business model and your future growth plans for your businesses. And Laura, maybe you can give us the insight from Leylo.
Obviously, as we're a really young business, we have this great opportunity right now, which is the people who've discovered us are very likely to be evangelical about what we do, because they're ahead of the crowd. They've made a smart decision. They feel like they're sort of early incumbents. So what we're trying to do is actually something that was spoken about quite a lot downstairs, is to ask customers, why have you chosen Leylo? And it's really bloody painful. Like, if I'm honest, asking that question sounds very simple when you're like, and then you implement it and ask. But reading the responses can be ouch, that's a bit painful, or really great, highs and lows. But what we're trying to do is to take the words customers use and to take the language that they use to tell other people about our business and apply that into our marketing, so that we can kind of mimic the powerful language that our early incumbents use in our own sort of wider scalable marketing. I think that's the primary thing that we're doing at the moment, is asking, why Leylo? What did you love? What did you hate?
And you're able to pick up and see what those people are saying about you as well from the outside world in some form? You're checking the social feeds
So obsessively. But we had a bit of a eureka moment really on that front, because up until middle of last year, everything we'd done was remote and everything was digital. So we didn't, we would read customer reviews, we'd read Trustpilot, but to an extent, people had curated what they wanted to say. And what was really kind of powerful was we did a pop-up in Selfridges over Christmas. And it was that moment when someone would come over and they'd try our product and they'd go, "Oi, Susan, come over here. This is like posh box wine," or and taking those words, and because it was so raw and it was like the best experience. I actually went to the pop-up every single day, even though it was like the busiest time for direct to consumer, because hearing those real world descriptions of what our wine was and what it tastes better than I thought it would actually, those kind of phrases were so important, and we've really sort of changed how we talk about our product as a result.
Oh, that's a great example of listening to the customers and
literally one-to-one learning. Yeah.
And I guess WW is very different from scale and size and offer to Leylo, but how do you think about?
Yeah, but at the heart of it, it's still about our members and our community and consumers. And so if you think about it, it's been around for 60 years, and it was the original social network in that sense, where Jean started it as a community. She knew that actually you will find more success on your health and wellness and weight loss journey if you're in a community and you're holding each other accountable. And so we built and continued to grow in that success ever since she started it. But obviously things change and we evolve, and community is different today than it was 60 years ago, and so it's trying to stay in the front foot of that. And I think part of that is really not walking away from what your consumers think and feel. And the last 2 years have been interesting in the sense where community, as Weight Watchers has known it primarily, vanished in a day or two when lockdown happened. And so we had to pivot, and we pivoted globally in 6 days to move from a physical environment into a virtual environment. And we're able to train all of our coaches on Zoom, but also trying to educate our consumers on how to use Zoom in the same way that they were used to going and having physical contact with people and conversation. And it has been a test and learn period over that whole entire 2 years. But what we've taken is every single time we can, after every single meeting, virtual or now physical or through email, we listen to our consumers and ask what they liked about it, what they didn't, what they want from it. And we were able to evolve our offerings through lockdown because of what consumers wanted and needed, and we were able to build and develop to keep them happy, coming back and satisfied, and ultimately successful on their health and wellness journey.
Wow, okay. And so you've already built that and operationalised that kind of feedback loop from the people who are participating in the programs out in the field. Yeah. That must be very powerful. And what have you learnt about the customers that are most likely to be the better customers, the more successful advocates for the brand? Yeah,
I think it's an interesting one because we do have a handful of member ambassadors that we use to help promote, because our brand essentially is faceless. Our brand is our members, and we are only as good as our net promoter score or what consumers feel about us, and that then dictates how long they'll stay in terms of their own successful journey. But what we've learned from them is being able to be nimble and respond. So, for example, in lockdown, we were talking earlier, people, the whole cooking sensation and trying to feel like you're part of something, we understood through doing surveys of what they were lacking is setting up live cooking sessions. So actually bringing to life the recipes that are on the app, how to, and making food that actually is tasty and on the healthy side for you, but you're not losing that whole idea of it's not a diet or restriction. So actually working with our consumers and making food with them. The other piece was getting them up and out. So the whole idea of exercise, and a lot of our members are older. Our core members, are 45 plus, but also we have a big cohort that is 60 plus, and a lot of them do have a significant amounts of weight to lose and aren't as agile and mobile. So we have to figure out the level of activities. So walking has been a really big USP of ours, and trying to encourage walking workshops. So getting people out. So you're still only be able to walking, on your own or with one other person, but we set up virtual walking workshops where you could actually be outside and commune and talk with hundreds of people around the country.
Oh, wow, that sounds like a nice way of keeping people active during those tricky months. Excellent. And Laura, have you been able to identify any particular behaviours from the customers that you're acquiring and that indicate their future referral likelihood, or even their quality of
so it's something that we thought about a lot at Naked Wines. So me and my co-founder obviously were both at Naked Wines, so take a lot of those kind of learnings. And something that we were very hot on, because we were spending a lot of money on acquisition at Naked, was how can we make sure that we are recruiting, I'm going to say the right kind of customers, but high quality customers, and what are the indicators that we can look for that will help us, figure out who they're going to be. And also, to your point, and with the ethos of Mention Me, who are the customers who are going to be very valuable to us, but also who are the customers who have the highest propensity to refer. Yep. And that was something we looked at in granular detail at Naked Wines. So in terms of how we've then applied that at Lelo, and it's really frustrating, right, when you go from a business that has tons of data to starting something from zero, where you kind of have to make a few assumptions. You're like, well, of my 20 customers I've had so far. We have taken some of those kind of starting points, such as, what does a customer tell us the first time they buy from us? So does it mean something if they buy more than one box? Well, actually, yes. A customer who buys 2 boxes in their first order is far more valuable to us in the long term than someone who just buys 1. I guess because it becomes part of, I shouldn't guess, I should just ask. But, because it becomes part of their drinking, it becomes more of a lifestyle than if they just buy 1 to take to a party or give as a gift. Some of the really interesting things we've looked at have been around what they buy first. So someone who buys a red wine from us is far more likely to be a valuable customer than someone who buys rosé to start. That said, we have a new rosé next week. So
that's all right. I have just become a customer of Layla, and I've just bought some
rosé.
rosé.
I saw that.
All right, okay.
The sorts of indicators that they give us in terms of then how quickly they come back to the website. Do they leave a review on Trustpilot? So we're kind of in the process of bringing that all together. I think my most interesting anecdote is probably something we observed at Naked Wines, which was around this perception of quality. So how does the experience someone has in their first order impact their long-term value to us? So we ran this test where we said, well, we have this acquisition case, and the wines are, crowd-pleasing styles, and most people will choose the acquisition case. So we created 2 versions of this, one that had the great set of wines, crowd-pleasing styles, the other that had exactly the same wines, except for we had a higher grade of glass, so the bottles were heavier. And actually we saw it was a statistically significant improvement in the retention from first order to second order for the customers who had bought the heavier glass wines, because people just assume because something is heavy that it's better quality. And we've run similar tests with things like corks versus screw cap, which is obviously not great running a boxed wine company. I have a whole heap of stigmas to overcome, but it's just really interesting when we are trying to take that granularity of thinking and that kind of open-mindedness to Lalo with, albeit a much smaller data set. But it's really fascinating. Yeah. Love it if you can get in there.
Well, it sounds like you're leaning very much into the early adopters being likely to be advocates for you. And so you were saying earlier that the Telegraph wine and food critic picking up was a big spur for you in the early days.
Yeah.
Are you able to harness the advocates or how do you look to harness those advocates as they are today?
I'm going to say that we probably don't do the best job of it right now. We have, so up until fairly recently, it's been 2 people and an army of freelancers, which is, now I look back on the last year, I'm like, we definitely should have hired some people sooner, but that's a learning, right? So I think that what we've tried to do, or what we've observed actually, is that when you're in a big business, so at Naked Wines, if you'd asked me like 5 years ago, I would have said, it's a waste of time doing PR. I mean, I know that's really stupid, but that is what I would have said, because you just don't see any benefit from it. But actually, what I have observed at Lalo, and starting with brand recognition of 0, like this brand didn't exist 2 years ago, is the cumulative impact of PR reviews and people saying nice things about you. And to date, this has helped us because we've seen, as we've had more PR, as we've had more kind of nice words in the ether about us, more brand marketing, our CPA, our cost per acquisition, has declined. So I could draw a graph between the kind of amount of coverage we've got from influencers and from PR and my CPA, and those 2 things would be inversely correlated. But also now what we're starting to do is to try and think of ways that we can harness that information and regurgitate it basically to customers. So, we ran a campaign recently that was, this is what people have said about our rosé. Like we could say it, but here's what people are saying. And that was one of our best performing email campaigns. In our paid social, we're trying to kind of use some of the, particularly sort of in wine, there's a real sort of culture of what the critics say matters. So, I have to kind of schmooze critics to get them to say nice things about us. And actually, so far they have. So, trying to kind of use that information and to deploy it in multiple different places in a way that feels on brand and, that isn't just like we're wonderful, but helping people to understand more about the category.
Yeah, understood. Great. And then let's try and narrow down what the sort of DNA of an advocacy-driven business might look like, drawing from your vast experience across many different brands. What kind of qualities or attributes do you think a business needs to have, or a business needs to know, or needs to do in order to be starting to drive advocacy and to harness that power in the customer base? Tony, is that something you can talk to from your time?
Yeah, I think, it's a longer term game, so I don't think it is, for us specifically, I was thinking back at Disney and Weight Watchers, it's a longer term game, so it's not a short term tactic, I think. So from a business perspective, it's like you have to convince your board and your executive leadership that investment in it is important, one, for the voice and the brand recognition and just the cumulative effect that you're going to get from that, and it's going to help longer term make your performance media work harder. So first thing is it needs to be a consistent, always-on program that you're going to look at, medium and longer term milestones, and it's finding then the right types of people that are going to be the strongest advocates. So we have an array of advocates that start from members, so real life people that are on the program and that are successful at losing weight but also maintaining. So there you've got the two halves of the story of like, I have been able to lose weight and I am feeling more confident in myself and I'm feeling healthier, but also I'm using Weight Watchers to maintain so I don't kind of peak flow. So finding a group of people that can really authentically, in their own voice, communicate why it's been successful for them so that other people can relate to them. And it's a mix of people. So you need age ranges, you need diversity in terms of male and female and race, etc., so that everyone feels that they can relate to those individuals. You then kind of have what we call our tastemaker level, where it is those kind of paid advocates, those that are at the smaller cusp of followings, again, so that you don't lose credibility, I think, in what and why they're doing it for you. And I think we've seen a lot of that happen and a lot of backlash with consumers against those type of people. So again, it's that fine balance of finding authentically relatable, but tastemakers that have a reason to be partnering with you, all the way up through to celebrity. So we've got everything from the James Corden level, but also locally Lorraine, who has worked really well for us, and there's an authenticity that comes with her. So there's, I guess, in summary, it's the breadth, it's not short term, it's the long term game, and you need to have people at every level that actually can authentically talk about your brand, but in a way that feels real to them, as much as it stays true to you.
That's interesting, because one of the first things you said actually was sounds like you had to persuade the senior powers that be to give you the space to pursue that strategy. Yeah. One of the questions I was going to have was the degree to which you have to balance the sort of short term, I've got to hit the numbers this month or this quarter, with the long-term view of, I think the best thing for this business is to be focusing.
It's a daily pressure of mine, in my team, not just me, to look at and to balance that and to balance the marketing dollars effectively, to make sure that you are getting the right long-term value to customer acquisition ratios. The right channels are in the mix. We're constantly having conversations about traffic and performance and signups and what we need to do short term. And it is trying to just ring fence a portion of your budget to kind of do long term that isn't going to hit the daily and weekly numbers. And sometimes I feel like I'm on autopilot and saying the same thing over and over again to my leadership in terms of that, but it has to be done because it. Otherwise, people in the world we live in right now, and the 2 years that we've just had, and I think most business will find short term has been the focus because we have to get month by month those numbers in, and now it's trying to take a step back and actually ensure that long term is there as much as short term.
It's a slightly different dynamic for you, Laura, I guess. You are the boss, so you don't have to...
write the numbers. Well, I mean, we recently took on... Well, we've done a pre-seed and a seed round of investment, so we do have investors who we're accountable to, and I think that something that me and Laura hold very close is, the plan that we've put forward is ambitious, and I want to be ambitious for our business. Like, I don't want to be okay with us, being a really small wine brand, forever. Like, I'm so excited about that trajectory. So I think for us, the challenge is holding, when you're a small team, holding yourself accountable to the numbers, carving out time, like you say, to invest in long-term growth. And I think also saying no to things that feel inauthentic to your brand. Like, there have been hundreds of things that have come, probably tens of things, opportunities that have come up, whether it's to work with a particular brand or whether it's, to do a partnership or whatever it might be, where it's not really the right fit. And I think it would be very easy at the stage I'm at, or we're at as a business, to be like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I think, we are trying to be choosy about, what is the long-term benefit to our business from this activity, and then also what is the short-term benefit that helps us, achieve our goals. It's really hard.
It's hard.
Really
it is
hard.
really hard. Because short-term wins 90% of the time right now sometimes. So, but it is trying to keep that long-term game and the need to invest in that and that balance of the two.
And how much of that is your role as VP Growth Marketing, and how much of that is responsibility to the whole business, and how do you encourage everyone else to be taking that approach as well?
Yeah, interesting, because I think community is everyone's responsibility, and customer experience lives in marketing, but also the whole business has to own it. And so we have an ops team that takes care of all of our workshops, our virtual and our physical workshops, and the customer experience that lives and breathes in there, and then we kind of help promote that. So it's like it is a business, community is a business ownership. It is not just a marketing team's ownership. I'm very vocal about that, and I feel like, they are our number one fan, and in the session that we had just before down there, it's like you have to listen to the negativity and actually lean into that and not shy away from it. And I think we've had a lot of that from a workshop business that we're trying to work through now, quite honestly, because we had to down tool during COVID. We had to, obviously, everything moved to virtual. And as lockdown started to ease, we started to open up our physical business again, but not at the scale that we were at pre-COVID, because we had to furlough a lot of our coaches and we had to make some people redundant. And now we're trying to rebuild that back up. And, we were running 5,000 workshops a week, before COVID. We're now at 1,000, and that's not enough. And so it's just trying to find that right balance, because everything we're hearing that clouds a lot of the good stuff that we're doing, and the good stuff we're hearing, the only thing that I hear is, I'd rejoin again if there was a workshop in my area. I'd rejoin again if you did this. Why did you cancel? Why did you make your coaches redundant? Why don't you have a workshop here? The one that I used to go to is now, the next one is 12 miles away. Like, that's all I hear. And one thing that's good, because we're trying to fix that and find that right balance of getting to that right level of workshop, because they're expensive to run too. So you have to understand that the profitability piece to it as well. But and then in my case, not forgetting some of the good stuff that we were doing, and it's trying to teach the teams to be like, lean into that, but getting our members to be our advocates and cheerleaders, so that we're not the only ones responding to those social comments, that our members are also responding to it as well. So then it can kind of galvanize in and of itself.
Okay, it becomes a bit more self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you scale, Laura, I'm guessing these challenges to a certain extent must lie ahead of you in terms of how you take the passion of a founder and scale that out across a team to make sure the customer experience is prime.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a benefit when you're a founder, and particularly when you're a little team, which we have been until recently. But it's that you are responding to every single customer email. It looks like it comes through to like hello at, but that's basically me. It has been me and Laura, and so having being there at the coal face and being able to kind of forced to listen and respond has been really valuable. One thing we were very clear about when we were hiring was customer service is everyone's job. So, we were lucky enough at Naked Wines where it was just part of the culture. So even the MD, Eamon, me, Laura, who was the COO, we would all do a day a month in customer service. Like I knew how to navigate the DPD dashboard. I knew all of that stuff, and I am so glad that was part of the culture there, and so keen that it remains part of the culture at Lelo. The only thing I would say is that I have found it like exactly as you described, actually, Tony. But like I've sometimes found it quite difficult as a marketer because it's almost like because you're the tip of the iceberg, because you are the revenue driving part of the business. It can be very frustrating to read customer service emails because you're like, oh my God, if warehouse were just better at their job, or if such and such hadn't overpromised, then I would be, I'd be smashing my numbers. And I think that that's also when you were describing it, I had never thought about it in those terms, but actually making sure that everyone realises that, do you know what, if the delivery is messed up, that customer doesn't come back to us, that's on you, or if we don't have a great unboxing experience, that can't solely sit with the marketing team. So I think that was a really well observed point, and something that I will take away from today, which is, sales and marketing isn't just, and customer advocacy isn't just the marketing team's responsibility.
Great point. Yes, absolutely. So I think we are running short on time for today, and we'll take some questions from the audience in a minute. But before we take questions from the audience, I'm giving them a bit of time to think about it. Any one little tips or tricks that you would give to people who think about generating a happy customer base? I've sprung this question on them a little bit.
I would say that being really, or like using data to back up the decisions you make and to interrogate the assumptions you have is so valuable. And actually, sometimes it can be a bit tough. Like, you might not want to actually look at your returns rate. You might not actually want to look at your CAC to lifetime value ratio because it might not be where you want it to be. But once you've sort of really like embraced that and lent into it, the path to making changes and improving it becomes so much better. So just not being scared to look into the numbers because it might be a bit scary.
Don't shy away from the bad news.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say keep it simple and don't overcomplicate it. And I think as marketers, we live and breathe it. We want to tell all of our consumers everything at various points. And I think as a consumer, it can be quite overwhelming. And I think what I've done at WW is really strip back our onboarding journey and really strip back it to the essentials. And telling my team, it may feel repetitive to you, but it's not to the consumer. And they need to be told that one message 4 times for it to land. And so don't shy away from that. Just keep things really, really simple and straightforward. Right. But also the data piece, my build on that is like be data informed, not data led. Because sometimes I think if we're led by data, we have blinkers on and you forget about your heart and you forget about your own experience. But if you're informed by the data and that you're actually allowing that to help guide and direct and make decisions, then that's a nice balance.
Great, thank you. Good tips. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Yes.
Lovely to meet you. This is a question more directed to Laura, I assume, because your company's newer. How did you tackle making Lolo personal without having a face of the company and not having someone else that as the spearhead or whatever, but making it still you're talking to customers, it's very VIP personal experience?
So actually, I would say we didn't. We took the other approach. So all of our CRM comes from me and Laura, and is written as such. So this is actually something that I learnt at Naked. So if you are a Naked Wines angel, you would, it's changed now, but Eamon Fitzgerald, who was my boss, he was the MD. All of the emails would come from Eamon. So it was Eamon, the wine guy, and they would look like, there was no fancy HTML. If you received a Naked Wines email, it looks like your friend has emailed you. Everything from the sort of design. I mean, it wasn't designed, I guess is the point. To sometimes he'd do this, we call it fake forward, where he'd forward an email from a winemaker. But more importantly than that, Eamon signed off everything with his name on it. So, even if it was the guy was pretty busy, but we couldn't send any comms until if it had Eamon on it, it had to be from him. And what was so amazing about that was we would get people replying to those emails, hundreds of replies, not just 1 or 2 people who didn't understand email marketing, saying, hey, Eamon, I've got a wedding coming up. What would you recommend for, I want a Pinot Noir from the New World, what would you recommend? And people didn't necessarily believe, I don't know if they thought Eamon would be there, but it was amazing when we went to the tasting tours where we had angels come and customers, we called them angels. They would see him and it was like, oh my God, it's Eamon. Like, oh, this is so exciting. So we've tried to make, I mean, much as I find it personally extremely embarrassing and like confronting, tried to make me and Laura the figureheads for the business. So on our social, we try and make sure that our faces are, are in the posts, the emails come from us. And actually, I think it helps to make, our category, wine is about trust, and we're asking people to buy 3 bottles of wine in one go and part with 35 quid. So, yeah, probably the opposite is that we've made ourselves front and centre of it.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
One more question over there.
Hi, so thanks for being very insightful. You both mentioned Builder Not Books, and I think that's a brand that most of us know, right? And it's very funny that both of your outlets. So I'm just curious, why do you feel like this, and what do you think they've done really well to make you feel like this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking over here. Why do I love Butternut Box? Well, I'm going to firstly say I don't even have a dog. So, I mean, this is, I'm advocating for them despite the fact that I don't actually have a dog. I'm more of a cat person myself. But 2 things. I think firstly, I love seeing on LinkedIn, if one of their customers has had bad news, if they ring up to say, I want to cancel because my dog died, they send them a present. Or, I'm just signing up, I've got a new pet, they will send them a blanket. And it's not like sending them a code or sending them, a Butternut Box. It's just like a thoughtful gift. And I see this so often. Once you're tapped into it, you'll see it too on LinkedIn, all the time, I had this amazing experience, And secondly, and you guys can't tell them I said this, Kevin and Dave, who run Butternut Box, have been the most amazing mentors to me and Laura. They are co-founders of a business. They work in D2C, and we spoke to them about getting some advice, and they have been overly generous with their time, with their expertise. And so on a personal level, I can say that the leadership at that business is like second to none. There's not a better co-CEO in D2C, in my mind.
And I think for me, the proof is in the pudding of Jack. He eats the food and he loves it. And so that's why I'm a massive advocate, because if you saw him before that, he wouldn't, he would just turn his nose up. What dog turns their nose up at food in the first place? So the fact that he eats it is great. But I think back to what I was saying earlier too, is the simplicity. I think the simplicity of the messaging and the conversation, it's immediately changed talking to me to talking to my dog, and it just brings the personality of a dog owner and lover to life, and that's what I think is great about it.
Great. Well, I think we are running out of time now, but I wasn't expecting quite so much of this conversation to revolve around dog food. I hope you have all taken something from it, with a huge array of different sized businesses and different sectors that Tony and Laura have worked in. Hopefully you've all got something that you can act on. Will you all join me in saying thank you very much to both of our panellists?